Hello and welcome to Reanimated. This is episode 149. My name's Stuart, and joining me, as always, is the illegible H.A. Conrad. Hello.
Illegible? Really?
You're unknowable. You're like a mystery because you can't be written down.
I thought it was like that you didn't understand the reading, like the writing. Like my writing is terrible, so illegible, right?
Don't read too much into it.
Okay. All right.
This is not illiterate, you know. Hi, how's it going? Good. We got some news. We have to talk about some of the really horrible crap that happened between now and the last time we podcasted. And we're also going to be reviewing I will withhold all judgments. We'll be reviewing a film.
Yes, we will.
Resident Evil's Retribution from 2012. So that's what we're going to be doing. I feel like, first off, on a serious note, we're going to begin by saying, when we talked last, John Bernecker, the stuntman from The Walking Dead, was like in critical condition, essentially. And then later that day, the news broke that he had died. Obviously, it's a horrible tragedy. One detail that I discovered about the way he injured himself, and fatally, and this is actually terrible too, is he was in a fight scene on a balcony with Austin, I forget his last name, the guy who plays Dwight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when he fell and fell 30 feet onto his neck and shoulders and head, and missed a safety mat in the process. I don't know if any of that was, if the fall was part of the scene at all. It might not. It probably wasn't, by the way it unfolded.
Yeah.
So, the poor man's family and loved ones, his loss, I'm sure, is just terrible. But also for Austin, who plays Dwight, God, I mean, being part of that, it must have been just horrible. But they've started it took 5 days from filming, and now they're back in production for that show.
Yeah, and they've been doing tributes for him at Comic-Con and things like that, just because, I think it's impossible not to be close to people on a set like this, and clearly The Walking Dead relies on their stunt people, for everything. So I just think that has to be devastating to family and chosen family. So sending out good thoughts to all those people. But
Mercedes Mason took over the Fear the Walking Dead Instagram for Comic-Con and was posting a lot of photos I'm sure she just had on her phone from production, including pictures of her stunt double.
Right.
Like, she was the woman taking the dive off the motorcycle, for instance, when Ophelia gets dumped at Brokesaw Ranch and stuff like that. And I think there's probably just a lot more. I'm sure it's always like a level of recognition for those people who do those dangerous things for the cast members, but this was
yeah. I think there's recognition, but it's things like this that really bring it more into the public eye. But because I think on set they are absolutely valued. I think the public doesn't always realize or appreciate how much work and just how vital it is to production to present things to us as they do. So
my mind keeps going back to that scene in Fear the Walking Dead season 2 where they take all the zombies are diving off that 40-foot pier. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing the behind the scenes shots of that where they're doing belly flops and just falling like zombies, but 4 stories into water, but still.
Yeah,
the craziest. They have to do insane things.
Well, and I think when we watched that scene and we had talked about it, I think we even commented at the time, man, those poor stunt people, because
right?
It looks dangerous.
From hell.
It looks dangerous. So
for real.
Anyway, but nothing can be said that's going to help, but just I think that the things that they can do to honor him and. His poor family, his poor wife, and it's just awful. So
the hits just kept on coming last week because a day later, I think, you sent me the news that George Romero had passed away of lung cancer. Is my understanding?
It was lung cancer, but it sounded like it had not been diagnosed very long ago, or at least that's what they were saying. Right. I think. There's been a lot of things like that unfortunately with lung cancer, sometimes you can find it pretty late and there's really nothing much to do. I had heard a few rumors that he wasn't doing well. And maybe like ultimately that's what they found out it was. I mean, they described it as a brief but aggressive fight against lung cancer, so that probably means that they didn't diagnose it till fairly late in the game.
Right.
But totally sad, and I he is 77 years old, but I mean, he's still been commenting and he's still been in the news and had projects in the works and things like that right up until even we talked about things like even a couple months ago. So, I mean, the fact that he, as a creator and a director, was still involved in things and still trying to put things out into the world, I think is impressive and just part of who he was as a person. And you can make fun of a lot of the stuff that George Romero does, but you cannot say that the man didn't have tenacity. And he obviously was the, in terms of touchstones for this genre and for like commentary, social commentary and political commentary and all that fun stuff. He is definitely the person that really started that out, even when everybody was making fun of it.
And people have really been going all out with tributes and giving him credit for not just like, a couple of ideas or, an entire genre is essentially what he gave birth to in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I'm happy to say that we managed to review almost all of his films until we the only one we didn't do was Survival of the Dead.
Right, which we probably will do at some point. But the other thing that we'll put a few of the links to some of the articles in the show notes. I thought that the one that the New York Times did was great. There's also one in the LA Times that was really wonderful. And I do think, especially given our current political and social like battles that are going on right now, they still have relevance. Some of the things that he was trying to bring to light at that time, and I think it's well worth examining that again. The idea that not just to pay attention to the other, but pay attention to the familiar in terms of things that could be threatening and things that humans are scared of. So
there's definitely a lot of fodder for that, for a visionary director or auteur to come in and use zombies as metaphor, for sure.
I don't know how much more you want to say about it. I just, I admit, my heart broke a little bit when I saw that because, of course, given my interest and love of this genre, everybody was texting me when it broke, and I just was truly. I actually had it like an initial reaction, hoping that it wasn't real, that it was one of those hoaxes. And that, because we saw some things going around April Fool's Day and things like that, that somebody I shall not name fell for. But I was really hoping that this was like a practical joke or like one of those stupid things that happens. But unfortunately, it was true.
Yeah. So rest in peace, George Romero. He's had an indelible impact on two people on this podcast.
Absolutely. And then in the other person that also died, I think on the same day, was Martin Landau.
For real? I didn't even hear about that.
It was the same day as Romero, so I think the Romero news overshadowed it.
It's kind of crazy because Martin Landau is a bigger star.
Yep.
Ostensibly. No?
Nope, but he died on the same day, I believe, and I think so. It's interesting that as an actor, also somebody who was contributing up until the end of his life, I thought his performance in Ed Wood as Bela Lugosi was absolutely phenomenal. And he was obviously in Things Over Time. He was, a Hitchcock. Did you see North by Northwest? Like he was in that. No. Just prolific actor. And so I really loved when he came back at the end, and he also ended up in a few TV series. Not quite the same touchstone for me as Romero, but still worth noting. So that is the end of our obituaries for the beginning of our podcast.
It's a new regular feature we're going to be doing now. So, also, just because George Romero died didn't at all put a damper on Forbes' love affair with the whole industry of zombie television and film.
I feel almost like they now have this little niche or this little corner where they're like, okay, in this corner, you guys are going to do this. Because this article popped up, and I was chuckling over it, thinking about how you would enjoy it when I sent it to you. But it is a little bit about Romero, but basically it's about their sort of very brief summary of the zombie genre in history, which is not very well done. It's a pretty shallow article, but I kind of thought that they probably had this ready to go anyway, because Fear the Walking Dead is on hiatus, so we can't have the love fest of the reviews with that. So I feel like they use this and like had Romero died, so they just like dropped that into this to give it a little bit more relevance. But just Forbes and zombies, who knew?
And it's a different author again. Like they're just growing their stable of men who think that either Fear the Walking Dead is amazing or just everything zombie.
Right. And also, even though George Romero died, doesn't mean that other people are not sort of doing their own thing with the zombie genre, things that I suspect Romero would very much disapprove of. And one of those things is Disney's upcoming series in 2018, Zombies. They came out with a very brief trailer, which we will also put in the show notes for those who want to torture yourselves. It's really bad, or at least my initial reaction was a very negative one. But clearly, it's not for people like you and I, Mr. Tiffin. But
no.
It's so ridiculous. It's like this is something that could make George Romero come back from the grave.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a thing. It's happening.
Yep.
It's gonna be zombies that are completely emasculated of all their terror.
Yep.
But hey.
Right.
I mean, iZombie's kind of already done that for me.
Yeah, I think it's the closest. It's still better than this. And I don't know if you saw this little tidbit, but, in more positive things, I guess, or things that I like more than this particular trailer, David Tennant apparently has been cast to be in Call of Duty to fight zombies.
David Tennant of Doctor Who and Jessica Jones fame.
Yep.
Is going to be... Well, actually, the thing that's most confusing to me is that the zombie modes on Call of Duty generally, I don't think, have a lot of story to them. It's mostly just about, like, killing wave after wave of bad guys.
Right, so this is part of the Nazi zombies mode, apparently. So he's going to be one of the main characters in that.
Interesting. And Ving Rhames.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sure.
So there's a happier piece, I guess.
Yeah.
But lastly, and also in happier news, Game of Thrones is back.
Oh, yes. Oh, God, was it ever?
Yeah, and it's so funny because I was thinking the exact same thing that you texted me while watching the show, because they basically hop from storyline to storyline, and they did it in a very interesting and seamless fashion. And in a way that gives you enough information that I would call this a setting the table kind of episode, because it's bringing everybody back.
Yeah,
you may have some new fans. However, I feel like they did it in a very smooth and functional way, I guess. I don't want to, in a way that kept the narrative going and kept the action going. I really, really enjoyed that episode.
Spoiler alert, I guess, if people haven't seen the season premiere of Game of Thrones, but this episode jumps from the twins, like the household seat of the Freys.
Yep.
It goes to the north of the Wall. It goes to the Wall. It goes to King's Landing. It goes to the Citadel. What other locations? And some places in between, wherever Arya is on the road and Ed Sheeran makes his cameo. I did not recognize him until I read about it afterwards.
I recognized him, and I was so annoyed by it. That guy needs to not be in everything. I find him to
Is he in everything? I don't feel like I see him.
Oh my gosh! Whoever his publicist is, I mean, they're doing a good job. But every 5 minutes, it's Ed Sheeran. He's in everything, and I really don't think that they needed to do this. They should not have had him had a singing part. Give me a break. I feel very strongly.
It's a show
about
with
this.
a lot. I mean, the books feature the singing and the culture of this oral tradition of songs more than the TV show has. So I thought it was nice that they would bring in someone who's singing a new song, like he says it's a new song. I don't know. I bought into it a little bit.
blah.
Blah, she says.
Blah to that part of it anyway. Sorry.
But yeah, so they have a lot of stories happening at a lot of locations. And unlike Fear the Walking Dead, when they try to do this, it feels a little cramped and unwieldy when they have done this in the past. They really they nailed the seamless jumping from one location to another. Oh yeah, they were also in Winterfell.
And the new location, Dragonstone.
Oh, in Dragonstone, yeah. Which isn't really... I mean, we've been in Dragonstone before, but I think we're going to see it from definitely a new perspective now.
Right.
Yeah,
and as this was
storytelling.
Yes, and as this was a setting the table episode, just the visuals of them walking in this way, not in flashbacks, and just really in this with Daenerys walking in as, basically taking her kingdom back. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Peter Dinklage, I don't think even had any lines.
He didn't. He just stood around, which was kind of... That was the one part I was pretty sad about.
It was kind of like a Mark Hamill at the end of at the end of the last Star Wars movie, except less intense. But so, the big zombie news out of that episode was a shot of the White Walker army marching south, and I think the part where a lot of people sat up straight in their chairs or shouted, like I did, was the revelation that the Giants have been turned, or at least a few of them, and It's kind of terrifying because we've lost, I forget the dude's name, but the damn bastard shot him in the eyeball with an arrow last season, and we're out of living giants. Let's just put it that way.
We're out of giants on Jon Snow's side, so
yeah.
But what I would point out with this narrative and what it does better than Fear the Walking Dead does, and granted, we are talking about a difference in productions, in terms of the money that Fear the Walking Dead has versus Game of Thrones, fine. But I don't think that means that your narrative has to suffer and that your storytelling has to suffer. One of the things I like that Game of Thrones does and Fear the Walking Dead doesn't do is that the storyline progresses generally in a way that makes sense with what the characters are, and what you know of the characters. Every once in a while, they'll do something that I think is maybe not something that I would expect a character do, but they usually explain it. And Fear the Walking Dead expects you to make those jumps just by doing these sort of arbitrary little actions, or now this is what we're doing, and especially in terms of the Madison character. So anyway, maybe they should take some notes. I
would put some of that down to the fact that George Martin has, even though he can't fucking finish a book,
right,
he has written an outline for the entire story.
He has, and he developed those characters.
There's an overarching plot, which
That's true.
you have to watch Fear the Walking Dead and think there is nothing guiding this plot, because when you look at the end of season 2 and the shootout with the people from the Colonia just crossing the border, and you think about it now based on what we know about the Brokejaw people and Troy's people, like, why did that shootout happen? Why were those guys guarding the border when they were there to get gas from a military base when these people were nowhere near it?
Right. So,
like, what?
Exactly.
And why did Jeremiah give a crap about Ophelia crossing the border? Like, they tried to make this whole border war thing, and we're supposed to think that we're definitely months past the beginning of the apocalypse. We're definitely past the first season of the Walking Dead Prime in the timeline, and yet there are these weird people making weird decisions based on borders of countries that don't even exist.
Right. And, the same thing that we had been talking about in terms of the battles between the Black Hats and the compound people. This absolutely makes no sense given the level of survival and the things that people are having to survive. I just don't... It doesn't sit well with me that these people would be caring about land rights and things like that. Now, if it was purely over a resource like water, which they are implying to some extent, that I understand a little bit more. However, they're in, like, some of the biggest country in the world, like, in terms of, like, there's got to be another place where there's water, and they must know that territory really well. So I just don't think that they would be bothering themselves with this strange vendetta against each other. I think that they would just, and granted there would be no conflict if they did that, but I feel like they need to come up with better plot lines in order
that are more contiguous, right?
Right.
Like that just
that would make more sense, and that you would feel were absolutely like a valid idea, like, you know, in terms of like the things that they were fighting over. So, but you are right. I mean, George R.R. Martin has provided an outline. The character development is all there. So even if they haven't used every single storyline from the books, they have definitely been using it to determine what they're going to do with different characters. And, you know, they've had to make some decisions where they've had to combine characters or try to move plot lines in a certain way just because it doesn't play out as well like on the screen as it does in a book perhaps. But the Fear of the Walking Dead is basically, I feel like they're just kind of throwing together stuff and they're like, okay, and so there's Walker, so everybody will watch. And I do think that they were much more successful this season in having more interesting stories to follow, and I did enjoy episodes more, especially obviously the one that you and I both enjoyed in terms of like oh gosh, what is Ophelia's father's name again?
Daniel Salazar.
Daniel. That was probably the strongest episode in my opinion. But other episodes had bright spots, and much more so than we've seen. So maybe they will continue to improve on that end. But
and it makes me wonder if part of this problem stems from just the open-ended sandbox that is the Walking Dead universe,
right?
Where even though people like Dave Erickson have said, okay, Travis's character's story is complete, that's why we could kill him off, we know that that was a bullshit answer, that it was really about the fact that he got the Avatar movies. But in a way, there is no story. There's no arc to The Walking Dead. It's just like, can these people survive, and how long can they survive for? Right. And that could go forever, or it could be really short. But in the case of a saga like Game of Thrones, that story has a lot of history, and the story could go on forever if you wanted to just be like, and now, after, you know, Daenerys takes over the Seven Kingdoms, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but that could be one outcome. And then it's all about, like, the problems she has after that. But the fact is, they're going to end the story, and it's going to be a package.
Right.
You know, like a story arc.
And that's the thing. I mean, the graphic novels for the original, for Walking Dead, you know, they've gone on and on forever, much like Game of Thrones. They've taken some storylines, they've combined some characters, they've killed off other characters that, you know, so they're not exactly following the same story. But Fear the Walking Dead doesn't really have that. And I guess what I thought was weird about, even when they started the show, was there's so much material out there, and you have access. I mean, you have like Kirkman there. How about like you figure out a way to make this make sense? So maybe it's an alternative like timeline. Maybe it's like you know, just the idea. One of the things that we were so excited about was just seeing what was going on in the other parts of the country. There's no way that Kirkman doesn't know what what is going on in the other parts of the country. I'm sure he had a good idea about different things that you just don't get to include maybe in the regular graphic novels. But it feels like they just kind of let these guys go off on their own and figure it out, without any sort of plan. So.
Not to. I mean, I feel like we're talking a lot of trash about a season of Fear the Walking Dead that we actually really like. So
I'm not talking trash. I'm just saying my hope is that what we see in the after the hiatus is more of the kinds of episodes that we were seeing in the first half, with even more improvement. So, but you can also tell probably from the amount of time that we are spending talking about these that we are procrastinating talking about the film that we watched this week.
Sweet Sassy Molassie. Resident Evil Retribution 2012 is a bad movie.
Yes, it is. It is.
End of review.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I wouldn't look. It is exactly what we have come to expect from a lot of the Resident Evil movies and the franchise. It is based upon a video game. I feel like this whole movie feels like you're going through different levels of a video game. The writing is very thin, and there is no character development really. To me, it felt much more, and maybe even more so than some of the other films, but it very much felt like I was watching somebody play through the game.
So let's start with the basics. It stars Mia Jovovich. Apparently, she had just had twins about a couple of months before they filmed this, which is bananas.
Considering what she looks like, because she still looks amazing.
Yeah, well, she's in a body glove the entire episode and wearing a bustier, but still. Or like a bodice. It's written and directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who I think has done that with every one of these films.
Yeah.
Just like he is the constant as well as she is. It did really well, grossing $240 million worldwide, and it was in IMAX and 3D. If you can imagine that, I would not have enjoyed that.
No.
I did not see this in the theaters. I was trying to think if I'd ever seen a Resident Evil movie in the theater. Have you ever?
I did. I saw the first one.
I'm certain that I've rented them all, but
I definitely saw the first one. Because I remember people, I think, in the theater getting very excited because, they do the whole fan service where you see certain scenes from the game and people were getting, like, rowdy about it.
Yeah. Things that are good about this film are Michelle Rodriguez, the little girl, whose name I don't even know what the actress is, but the girl who plays the clone of Alice, I guess?
Yep.
Or like a human version of Alice. She is fantastic. Every time she talked, like, my heart broke a little bit.
She was good.
I would say that Mia Jovovich's performance was kind of like cardboard.
Yep.
I didn't feel much for it. Same for Kevin Durand was fine. He's a good, the guy who plays Fett from The Strain.
Yep.
But yeah, that's it really for things I liked about this movie.
Yeah, I didn't like a lot, and also even when they do the open where they're doing the narrative in the beginning, it's exactly like all the other ones. So much so that I was like, wait, because remember,
have I seen this before?
When you and I were talking before, we honestly couldn't remember whether we had reviewed this, which I think says a lot. But I actually had a moment where I was like, wait, have we already seen this before? Because it was just exactly like all the other, sort of like in last week's episode of Resident Evil, or last year's episode of Resident Evil. So I guess, if you really want to have something on the background that's just kind of like a mindless action something, I guess this is it, because you really don't need to pay attention to any of the dialogue nor anything that actually happens in this film. Yeah. And even up to the very end where they show like there's like a big, scene where they see the real world. Like the basis of this film is that she's basically in a like computer generated reality.
No.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of it is like she's in a facility, and so she's going through the different sets. So yeah,
but the facility is physical.
Oh no, it's physical, but initially
I thought you meant that she's in the Matrix or something.
No,
she's not in the Matrix.
But initially she doesn't realize that she is, and like so there's all that going on. But at the end, she gets to see what's happening, and it's just like this crazy over the top scene with all like the crazy characters, and they just kind of threw everything into this to show different things from the game. And it was kind of weird. Like, I just found my attention wandering throughout this whole film. It was very hard to keep focused.
Oh, yeah. I spent the last half of the movie on Twitter, just, like, every so often looking up and being like, oh, wait. Michelle Rodriguez is back. It is as a new character. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, they killed off that one character who showed up and who I'd forgotten all about.
Right.
That's also the problem, is there's a lot of characters, and I've never played the games other than the very first one, and way back in the day.
I feel like everybody played the first one.
I don't have a lot of connection to these people who show up, like Luther West, who I remember, I think, from the prison one.
Yeah, but now he's supposedly a good guy, or at least somebody she's cooperating with. They just basically, this is an example of just sloppily trying to like wedge stories into like a very weak film. So
one more thing that I did enjoy was the very final scene.
Yeah, that was good.
It's a blockbuster CGI scene of the White House surrounded by zombies, and I thought they put a lot of effort into that shot, and it was cool.
That was nice.
Yeah,
that was nice. And then the whole the kind of the Washington Monument under siege was kind of cool. Like just that whole like panorama when they like pull out was good.
Exactly. That's kind of what I mean. That panoramic shot was fantastic. Things that I hated with a passion included anything with Sienna muscularly who
Yeah.
played Jill Valentine.
That was
until
terrible.
she got the spider off of her chest at the very end of the film. So almost everything she did was annoying because she would just stand in front of the camera
And-
with two guns in her hands and
and
like
look.
wiggle her hips back and forth
Yeah, that was it.
as she shot.
Yep.
I'm doing it right now. Can you tell?
I can tell. I can hear the hip wiggling.
Yep, it's wiggling. And it was kind of like she's the main antagonist for Alice, and they're both just wearing like these body gloves. I don't know. Yeah, there was nothing redeemable about this film. Like the zombies are, the choreography I guess is fine. In the slow motion scenes where Alice is fighting all of these zombies, like in the Tokyo scene. But at the same time, I know that there's nothing on the line. There's zero sense of like risk and reward.
No, not at all. I do think that the number of times you keep bringing up body gloves makes me think that perhaps you want a body glove. And so,
For sure.
you know, if anybody listening feels like contributing to like a crowd-rise fund for Stuart's body glove, let us know.
Yep.
Just throw just throwing that out there. Couldn't we all use body gloves, you know?
For real.
Keeps everything inside, looking tight.
Except for your cleavage in the case of Jill Valentine.
Well, that's something you want to have out there, you know. One of the things I did enjoy was just the whole idea that they were, like, it was kind of funny, the whole recreation of Shibuya. Have you ever been to Tokyo?
Yes. No, but I know what that intersection is.
Well,
it's very famous.
it's a very
it's in
famous,
everything.
It's a famous intersection, and it takes you forever to get across the street, and it's actually pretty nerve-wracking to try to do it because you have to get there in the time before the speeding traffic comes through. You know, in such films as Fast and Furious, Tokyo Drift, that kind of stuff happens all the time.
Right.
But, you know, I thought that their ideas for some of the visuals were really pretty and beautiful, and like from a choreography point of view, that stuff was great. It was just kind of unfortunate that none of the storyline helped with any of that. Like, it was sort of like you kind of move from scene to scene. Just it felt like you were moving from scene to scene just for the purpose of showing that pretty choreography and things like that. And that is a little bit of what these films are about. But others, I feel, have been much more successful in at least having like a modicum of an interesting plot line, like something.
Yeah, and yet it wasn't there.
No. But yeah, I don't really have too much more to say about this other than we're slowly making our way through to the end. But this doesn't give me too much hope for the next few. Or do we have 4 more after this?
No, just one.
Just one. Okay.
Yeah, and then they're gonna and then it reboots, of course.
Of course it does. I would love to hear anybody else's thoughts. Like, if you really love this, let us know why. I would love to entertain those thoughts. Feel free to send us an email at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, tweet at us, reanimatedpcast, or just leave a comment on the site, which is reanimatedpodcast.com.
Hit us up. Let us know. Probably more interested in hearing what you think about Game of Thrones season premiere than I am about
Correct.
Any more Resident Evil. But give us a holler next time when we come back. We're going to be talking about some other stuff. Yeah, hit us up and come and listen again next time on Reanimated when we review a film that is currently on Netflix called Here Alone.
That sounds good to me. But we won't be alone. We'll be with each other.
Thank goodness, because I get scared.
Even in your body glove.
Hey, never. If I had my body glove, I'd be like, everything's fine.
It's like a security blanket. It's all good.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
All right.
It would be, the way I envision it is more like a still suit from Dune.
Nice.
You know?
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
Would you also have flying powers with that?
Flying powers?
Yeah, because a couple of the enemies, like the Baron Hakonnen or Hawkinson or whatever. Remember, he like floats around.
Not a Harkonian
one. Yep.
Harkonnen. I'd be much more like an Atreides or one of his Fremen. Just like, you know, with my drinking my pee and my poop out of my little suit straws.
Sweet.
That's how that works. Yeah, and riding on sandworms. That's how I roll.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're gonna get together in a week or so. And yeah, come and check out the new podcast when we get back at you. Thanks for listening.
Ciao.